RHS Chelsea 2026 has definitively moved away from immaculate lawns, large expanses of new paving in outdoor rooms, and constantly fighting with your climate or your soil to achieve something that actually doesn't really work. It's Alexandra here from the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel and blog, and I've just been to RHS Chelsea 2026, where I really enjoyed the fact that for the first time there's an emphasis on native plants. And it's not just, oh, you must plant native plants and nothing else. It's also about resilient planting, about plants that have adapted to your local conditions and can provide shelter and habitat and food for wildlife when your native plants can't because of irregular weather conditions. Of course, native plants are different wherever you live, but the principles are the same. So here are the trends that stood out at Chelsea 2026 and what they mean for your garden. Well, as I said, the two words around planting are resilient and native. Self-seeding plants and easy care trees and shrubs make for more relaxed gardening. What you need is adapted, resilient, naturalised plants, plants that are just really happy in your soil and climate. And that means getting drought-resistant plants if you regularly have droughts, plants that like damp if you live in a damp climate. It's not a one-size-fits-all gardening theory. And also one of the themes that popped out is that we should all cherish pockets of slight wildness and not try to tidy them away. Things like edgelands, brownfield sites, pavement plants, urban fringes, that corner of the garden that somehow you've never managed to get around to doing anything to and it's full of weeds. Well, actually that can be a rather lovely habitat if you look at it slightly differently. So it's not about fighting nature, it's collaborating with it. Arit Anderson's Parkinson's garden also had 70% proportion of UK native or locally adapted resilient plants. For example, Honesty, which is Lunaria annua, was in many show gardens for the first time. I don't think I've seen it at Chelsea before. It has lovely purple flowers in early summer, and then those become sort of plump seed pods, and then eventually they become those lovely sort of glittering dried gold seed coins that flower arrangers love. And of course, if you've got something like Honesty or cow parsley or buttercups, they'll self-seed a lot. So self-seeders give a garden this kind of irregular, quite relaxed flow. The idea is you should edit self-seeders rather than weed them out. Combine them with grasses and with native hedging. Ornamental grasses and shrubs and multi-stem trees look great with self-seeders. So also look for plants that can cope with extremes. The Eden Project Bring Me Sunshine Garden by Harry Holding and Alex Michaelis used coastal meadow planting with salt-tolerant species such as sea buckthorn and saltbush because the Eden Project is in Cornwall, quite close to the coast. And Tom Stuart Smith's Tate Britain garden, of course, had to deal with shade because of course, it's in the middle of the city. So it relied heavily on bold foliage, drought-tolerant, shade-loving foliage plants, including things like Farfugium, the tractor seat plant. This loose, relaxed planting does need a little bit of structure around it. And one thing that worked really well in most of the show gardens is that they used a big statement to anchor loose planting in a small space. And that's really something that we can use at home in our smaller gardens. So you could think of a sculpture, an urn, a pergola, a boulder, a reclaimed bench, an architectural feature such as a rock wall, or even combining one or two or more of these particular attributes. Sarah Eberle's On the Edge garden used a fallen tree sculpted into a guardian figure. The Eden Project garden used dramatic curved solar structure. Baz Granger's Seed in Time garden combined soft planting with a striking straw bale shelter. Now it looks really contemporary, but it's using traditional crafts. And that's another theme of RHS Chelsea 2026. So, contemporary style, but use a traditional craft when you're making it. And when it comes to hard landscaping, low carbon, local and reclaimed materials dominated. The hard landscaping and the garden furniture was less polished and more individualistic than it has been in the past. Reclaimed materials appeared repeatedly, such as reused stone, brick, timber, gravel and other local materials, including a sort of rich red ochre type mulch, which seemed to be something between a sand, a soil and a gravel. And I couldn't really find out what it was, although I believe it's a mixture of topsoil, peat-free compost and biochar. I saw it on the RHS King's Foundation garden, designed by Francis Tophill, and in several other gardens. And most of the paving was quite broken up. Now, the problem with a continuous stream of paving, where you've got it all cemented and mortared together, is that the water rushes off into the drainage systems. It causes flash flooding, and if you haven't had it properly put in, it could even add to damp in your own garden. So the idea is to keep as little continuous paving as possible and as much planting to allow water to drain off. Obviously, on some paths, like in Arit Anderson's Parkinson's garden, you don't want the paths to be broken up themselves because people may trip. But on the other hand, there's a large percentage of planting in the rest of the garden. Water was interesting. There was a great deal of what are called rills. Now, rills are very narrow channels of running water, and they were used really creatively in Arit Anderson's Parkinson's garden as a water rill as part of a handrail for Parkinson's sufferers. However, there were rills in the ground, such as in the Tate garden by Tom Stuart Smith, and I think this isn't terribly practical for small gardens because I can imagine someone in high heels could easily break an ankle. However, that may be me just not seeing the full potential of rills. But what I think it is showing is that people are being much more interested in how they use water in their gardens. It's not just pop in a mini pond, it's let's recycle our rainwater, let's have a damp area, and so on. In a video that I did with James Alexander Sinclair and Joe Swift, James said, turn your seating into sculpture. And I would say that RHS 2026 has gone one step further and turned your pergola, your gazebo and your shelters all into sculpture. And once again, this actually works really well for a small garden and really well with a looser and more naturalistic planting because you've got something to look at, a sort of focal point. And there were some amazing pergolas and gazebos, such as the RHS King's Foundation garden. As we've already said, Baz Granger's Seed in Time used straw bale walls for the shelter. Catherine MacDonald's Boodle's garden created a decorative pavilion. Kazuki Ishihara used a Japanese tokonoma, a place to contemplate. And the Eden Project garden had its solar-powered shelter. Arit Anderson's Parkinson's garden had a wide arch with seating, and some of the other gardens as well had a noticeable Japanese influence in very simple shelters. When it comes to trees, show gardens, particularly Chelsea, have really taught us that multi-stemmed trees work well in smaller spaces. Many of the show gardens had multi-stem trees, and they work because they don't grow as big as single-stem trees. They create dappled light and they make the most of the space. They're very, very pretty to look at. Perhaps one of the biggest new things at RHS Chelsea this year was the idea of thinking about your garden at night. The Bat Conservation Trust's Nocturnal Garden focused on night-scented plants, night pollinators and restrained lighting. So it's really important if you want to support wildlife, but you still want to see your garden looking gorgeous at night. Make sure the light's pointing downwards, perhaps use a timer so that they go off after a certain amount of time, and also make sure that the light itself is quite soft and gentle. Reclaimed and recycled ideas have been quite big in shows for a few years, and even when a show's passed, it can offer some really interesting ideas. So don't miss this video coming up next, which has got the RHS Chelsea's recycled and reclamation ideas. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.